What's happening, people? Thank you so much for being here on the Bituation Room podcast live stream. Very excited to have you. I'm excited to have you. I'm not excited for the things that we are going to discuss today. I am enraged and disgusted. And there's a lot that we're going to be breaking down. Not only the latest out of Gaza, but, and I've been waiting to talk about this with Paige Oamek, our very own producer, who is a journalist in her own right. We're going to talk about the criminalization of homelessness. And right now, a case that is before the Supreme Court that a lot of states are looking to, because the future of, the safety of people who live on the streets is at stake here, if it already wasn't at stake, as Paige is reporting, and as well as Rohan Montgomery's reporting, who's going to be here as well, has detailed. So they look at Kentucky, and then we're going to talk about the broader implications for the country. So very excited to get into all that. But to break down what's going on in Gaza, Blakeley from Instagram, from TikTok, songwriter, is going to be in the Bituation Room very, very shortly. So really excited to have them on for the first time, longtime fan. And then finally, we're going to play a game, which is what hasn't been swallowed by the private equity universe. The game is called Private Equity, and you have to guess which brand or franchise has not been, completely sort of invasion of the body snatchered by a private equity firm and has gone under. Yes, this is about Red Lobster. No, I don't really like Red Lobster, but I'm doing it for my family and my family's honor because Matt Lieb loves Cheddar Bay biscuits. So there, I said it. But first and foremost, if you guys are here listening as a podcast, give this podcast 5 stars. Take a little moment out of your moment and do that. And if you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, why don't you subscribe right now? Why don't you click the like button? Why don't you share and let people know what you get up to on a Tuesday afternoon? And remember, this is just one fragment. This is a third of the Bituation Room. It's the good third. I mean, they're all good. The point is thus. We do a Wednesday bonus show for patrons and a Friday show for everybody. So get at that. Become a patron, patreon.com/Bituation Room. You support this show. You support this mighty labor of love and the people who work with me on it. Again, thank you so much to people who have joined, and also thanks to members on YouTube, which you can also become and get access to those bonus episodes on Wednesday. Last Wednesday feels like a million years ago. But yes, we did have a show on Friday, and I broke down my appearance on Piers Morgan talking about trans sports, and a lot of fragile comments. Woo, real fragile, but that's okay. I stand by what I said. And one day you will too. One day you'll realize I was right. You were wrong. One thing we're not going to talk about today, speaking of that voice that I'm about to do, is Donald Trump's hush money trial, which is ending today. And so I feel like I don't want to jump the gun on that. We'll talk about it soon enough, if not later in the week, next week. I did want to share with you, if I can get this, just one final announcement before we move the show along, which is that we are going to be live in Chicago for the DNC. Again, providing everybody some much needed laughs. right around the time that they also get arrested en masse for protesting for Palestine. We're going to be at Lincoln Lodge. That is, when I say we, and this is tiny, but it's me and Matt Lieb who are going to be doing a mashup episode. Bituation Room meets Bad Hasbara live in Chicago at the Lincoln Lodge Monday, August 19th. Why Monday, Francesca? Well, because guess what? Tuesday, Matt Lieb and I are going to be doing stand-up. So come get your tickets. The ticket link is live at thelincolnlodge.com/calendar. The ticket link is live to get Monday tickets. Somehow not live yet to get the Tuesday tickets, where we will be doing 45 minutes of stand-up each. So it's a double headliner. So definitely come through. It's going to be really, really nice to do this in Chicago. Love Chicago. And I'm so excited to be bringing the podcast there live, as well as there's going to be big name guests. So I'm a little bit wary because I'm like, I don't want the shit to sell out immediately. I wanted to sell out, but there's only a little bit over 100 seats. So get your tickets. I think it's through Eventbrite and actually not Live Nation Ticketmaster. So thank fuck for that. But anyway, moving right along, let's get into it. There's so much to talk about. This is What Are You Bitching About? Get them bitch caps on. So this is a story that broke late last night and on into today. But 972 magazine and The Guardian have done a deep dive expose into a Mossad op, the head of Mossad, in fact, again, Israeli intelligence, waging a decades-long campaign against the ICC. All right. So that the International Criminal Court, again, this is somehow for a most moral army and government that does not believe it's doing anything wrong, is very, very concerned that these international bodies are going to start investigating them because clearly they've proven they cannot investigate themselves. And we'll talk about that. But we now know that this has been going on. And when I read you the details, you tell me what it reminds you of and the types of behavior. And if not, we'll all get there together. But this is for The Guardian. It's a fourth. There's also a Local Call, which is a Hebrew language outlet that worked on this investigation. And the revelations about Cohen, again, this is the head of the Mossad op, form part of a forthcoming investigation that reveal how multiple Israel intelligence agencies ran a covert war against the ICC for almost a decade. Now, specifically circles around the former head of the ICC, again, the person who preceded Khmer Khan, and her name is Bensouda. What is her first name? I apologize, but her last name is Bensouda. And this is one of the many times and many instances that this happened. And I don't know if we have the graphic here, but I will find it. I think it got swallowed by our beautiful, system here. But the article opens with talking about how Cohen, again, the head of the Mossad, told Bensouda basically put the mob squeeze on her and said, you wouldn't want anything to happen to you should you start investigating us. You might find yourself on the receiving end, or your family might find yourself on the receiving end of something not good. And let me just read the actual quote here. Sorry about this, y'all. Okay, I can't find it, but it's okay. We'll just go into the actual details of what happened. One of the things that happened was that Bensouda was in New York in 2018 on an official visit and was meeting with Kabila, the president of the DRC, at his hotel. The pair had met several times before in relation to the ICC's ongoing investigation into alleged crimes committed in his country. The meeting, however, appears to have been a setup. At a certain point, after Bensouda's staff were asked to leave the room, Cohen, again, Mossad head, entered, according to three sources familiar with the meeting. The surprise appearance, they said, caused alarmed Bensouda and a group of the ICC officials traveling with her. So I want you to understand how terrifying that would be. Like, you think you're having a meeting, all of a sudden everybody leaves, and the head of the Mossad swoops in. That's not all. On one occasion, Cohen, who ICC officials basically say that Cohen was stalking Bensouda. Cohen is said to have shown Bensouda copies of photographs of her husband, which were taken covertly when the couple were visiting London. On another, according to sources, Cohen suggested to the prosecutor that a decision to open a full investigation would be detrimental to her career. They also got her home phone number, and she asked Cohen, "How did you get this?" And he goes, "Don't you know what I do for a living?" Finally, and this is according to the reporting, basically experts and former ICC officials say that these Mossad efforts to put pressure on Bensouda could amount to offenses against the administration of justice under Article 70 of the Rome Statute, a treaty that established the court. In other words, the very thing that you're doing to try and scare and threaten the head of the ICC is a violation of the ICC, right? And when I said, who does this remind you of? This feels like Weinstein shit, right? Like you're having a meeting in a hotel room, you want to part, except instead of showing you his mangled dick, it's, oh, please don't, or not, please don't, do not investigate my country's war crimes, which is interesting because Weinstein hired former Mossad agents to go after some of his accusers. So, hey, it all comes full circle. But so, again, Bensouda wasn't the person to suggest or recommend arrest charges for Netanyahu and Gallant, but she began some investigation. This is way prior to October 7th, began an investigation into Israel's actions, I believe in both the West Bank and in Gaza. So there you have it, man. Like, you not only, first of all, for a country that skirts international law and says the UN doesn't matter, the ICC doesn't matter, the ICJ doesn't matter, you sure as shit care a lot about whether or not they're going to investigate you. You sure seem to be pretty scared, and you're going to these lengths. You're threatening people. You're following them. You're taking pictures of them and their husbands and their families. You're threatening their families. It would be a shame if anything happened. These are not the good guys. And ironically, and once again, this is Israel trying to undermine international law that was established in the wake of the Holocaust, in the wake of World War II. This is international law established so that never again meant never again for anyone. And Israel's like, no, but except for us, like, except we believe that actually we can do whatever we want. That doesn't apply to us. No, it absolutely does. And here you have it. And then you have Biden and Republicans saying they're not going to abide. This is preposterous. It's outrageous. We're going to do our own investigation. Really? Where is it? Well, we're going to wait for Israel to investigate themselves. Anyway, I apologize. I can't find that quote, but it is very chilling. And that just broke. I mean, this is a precursor. There's going to be even more of a deep dive. And it's Fatou Bensouda, excuse me, who was stalked. But let me bring in, maybe to weigh in on this and so much more. They're a content creator, a songwriter. You've seen them hopefully on Instagram and TikTok, and probably one of the premier Michael Rappaport clowners, if that's a thing. Please welcome Blakeley to the show. Blakeley, how are you?
Oh, hi. Good. How are you?
I'm all right. It's just every day, every day it's something new. And
Yeah.
Blake, I was telling you that we don't only focus on Gaza on this show. In fact, we probably did like 2 or 3 segments in the last like 4 years, which, like, full disclosure, maybe not enough for a weekly show. But since last October and the ensuing genocide, it's been all the time, and like for good reason. And I'm really curious about your like origin story on this, because you've been so unapologetic. You're quick with the videos, but you're also, this is not what you do. You're an artist. This is not your main thing. So how is this like taken over your life in many ways?
Yeah. So prior to October 7th, which I've talked about before, I literally didn't know anything about this, like, at all. I was super uneducated about it. I already paid attention to politics. I
Yeah.
already cared about politics, liked politics. But as you know, a lot of our politics does not center around foreign policy. We don't really talk about foreign policy. And whether you're talking about a lot of so-called independent media or whether you're talking about the corporate media, all of them have the same line on Israel. It doesn't matter if you are on the left or the right. It's all the same song.
Yeah.
So as someone who didn't really spend that much time on international politics and mostly focused on domestic when I was watching it, consuming it, reading it, I just thought that like Israel was this beautiful democracy that's just trying to survive in a rough neighborhood with a bunch of Arabs who hate them and are all anti-Semitic. And it's embarrassing that I believed that I was like, yeah, they're just trying to survive, man. They're just trying to, and I think part of that, obviously, understandably, because I did learn about the Holocaust and know about the Holocaust. So I assumed, because they love to use it, that it was a legitimate argument.
Who would use it in bad faith? You know, who would use something like the Holocaust to justify crimes? That'd be a terrible thing to do.
Right, exactly. So after October 7th first happened, I was taking the side, I guess you could say, of Israel when it first happened. Because I was like, you know, the 40 beheaded babies hoax that came out and all the other things that they were saying. And because I was so ignorant to the story of Palestine and the story of Israel, I just saw what the news was saying and saw what people were saying and thought, why would someone do that?
Right.
Why would someone do that? Like to all these like innocent people. But then I don't remember who I saw that said it. It might have just been some rando that I saw that was like talking about the occupation. And I really didn't know about it. And so I just started looking it up. And I basically went down a rabbit hole of looking
So you
up.
did what Hillary Clinton said, which is that most people don't even know their history on the Middle East. You were like, okay, I'll find out.
Yeah, that's actually what I love, because a lot of people were like, you need to educate yourself. Get educated. But I was like, well, I did. I guess it just didn't turn out how you liked. So like I went down like a mad rabbit hole where it was like obsessive. All I was doing was reading about it and watching. And I watched like every documentary I could find. I just went online and picked off 5 random books about Palestine and just started reading them. I started looking up authors. I started looking up people on Instagram who were covering it.
Right.
And for probably a good month and a half, I was doing nothing but reading about it and learning about it. And then the more I learned about it, the more I was shocked. And that sounds so stupid because we know our government lies to us all the time.
Sure.
So it sounds like naive, but I was shocked at the level of lying and like the level of gaslighting,
right,
and the level of which of Israel's involvement in our politics, which you can never say, because if you do, they say you're anti-Semitic. And it's like, I was just shocked. Like, I was like, wait, it was like all those, wait a second. Like,
you did. I mean, I think a lot of people did that, but I also think a lot of people did not do what you did. And also I am like, you also immediately started speaking out about it. And I think that's really hard. I mean, I've been coming to this moment of like, you know, like my initial reaction, which was, I can't believe it takes the death of Israeli citizens in the thousands or just over 1,000 for us to be paying attention to this untenable, awful situation. And it breaks my heart that that's what happened. And that was seen by some, you know, liberal Zionists who know me, was like, that's insane. Why would you say that? And when people are initially expressing their solidarity with Palestinians, it's because we all knew, those of us who like knew the issue, had worked around the issue, knew that this was coming, knew that this insane overreaction, this genocidal warpath was going to happen. And so like, that's why a lot of us were like, first of all, this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Like, it has to do with land. This has to do with colonialism and an untenable situation. And so I have I mean, obviously, like I think a lot of people are like, and I'm curious what you think, where it's like, no matter where you are with this issue, it's never too late. It's never too late to change course. It's never too late to get informed and to read. But but also a little bit 8 months in, I'm like, I mean, if this doesn't move you, I don't know if there's hope.
Right. I actually agree with you on that. I'm glad you said that because that is something that I think sometimes we're tempted, and I am too, to when somebody is still at this late date not noticing, you're like, why? What is wrong with you? And you want to wring their neck. At the same time, I think the left has always had a serious problem with we act like issues, progress, politics is a club that only certain people are allowed in, and we
Totally.
gatekeep it. And if you didn't buy the right outfit or whatever, like you can
Right.
go away. Like we're always
Right. Yeah.
excluding people and bashing them for not knowing enough as soon as they should have known it.
Yeah.
And then, we turn around and get upset that people think leftists are insufferable. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be insufferable. Like,
Right, exactly.
learn. So yeah. And there were a lot of people that immediately started attacking me as soon as I shifted my position. And it was because, and I got so passionate about it because I don't know how you can. I guess I'm
Yeah.
having a hard time understanding how people can. I saw the things that were starting to happen and I couldn't believe it. I thought, how are we allowing this to happen?
Yeah.
What happened to never again?
Yeah.
And then just seeing the things that were happening and the injustice, I'm a very passionate person. So once I decide I have an opinion on something, it is hard for me not to be very outraged or passionate about what I'm saying. And I think part of it was just, I've said this before, but when you first get saved, or people who are Christians will know this, and they're on fire for Jesus and they want to go tell everybody about their
Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt. I just
Yeah.
felt like I'd been lied to, like I had been shielded from the truth. And so now that I knew the truth, I wanted to run around and tell everybody who didn't know, like, you're being lied
Proselytize.
to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's huge. It's also really big to be able to make that pivot semi-publicly, and and just be like, I was wrong, but I've learned. And you also are like, really, I appreciate your humor. I appreciate you freaking out, and of course, you're on the right show if you want to bitch about stuff. Which we kind of have to. I have to. I'm glad I get to know you more, but I have to move. We have to move on to the week, which is
Yeah.
also moving on to our least favorite / favorite topic, because it's the one that eclipses everything. But this is the week where. So this was the week where Israel's in full blown assault on Rafah. And so any discussion, it is May 28th now, but any discussion of red lines, if they do this, the weapon sells that, no, it's been going on. That's a foregone discussion. That is an irrelevant and hypothetical discussion because Rafah is being attacked, including safe zones. And I know you know this, Blakeley, but Sunday night, Israeli missiles struck a tent encampment full of displaced families, which immediately set it on fire. 45 people were killed, 250 were injured. And mind you, this was just 2 days after the ICJ, International Court of Justice, was saying Israel needs to stop the assault on Rafah to avoid genocide. Even just since this attack, there's been 60 missile strikes on Rafah and another tent massacre that just today happened that killed 21 people. But I want to sort of read. Look, I don't show video lightly. I usually never show video. I don't even usually share video on my social media, but I'm going to share a video from Sky News because somehow Sky News is doing the work, but also share this eyewitness account from Middle East Eye. They said, this is from Mohammed Abu Seba, who said, I came out of my tent and saw fire everywhere. A young girl was screaming. We helped her and her adult brother. When we returned, the encampment was totally destroyed. It took around 11 fire trucks between 1 and 2 hours to finally stop the fire, according to Al Fayoum. I think that was someone else who's quoted earlier. The teenager said her family were planning, that's Fayoum, were planning to relocate to another camp on Monday morning as the Israeli attacks in Rafah had increased in recent weeks. But they've lost their money in the fire, meaning they can't go anywhere now and have no tent to shelter in. I mean, I don't know about you, Blakeley, but the idea that money is still a thing for people. And we know that because of the massive amounts of GoFundMes and people trying to leave. But I'm just like, so if you survived, your money is now gone, and so you can't pay for food if there is any, but to go anywhere, to get travel or get a new tent. It's just wild. Yeah. Let me play this video and then we'll talk if we're not sobbing in a little ball. This is from Sky News, and this is a man who he had a 14-year-old daughter who was killed. And look, guys, there's been accounts and their video of a baby whose head was blown off by the impact of the missile. This is a 14-year-old. Same thing happened to her. There isn't, obviously the footage isn't graphic, it's blurred, but just take a look.
Aya was 14 years old. She was decapitated in the explosion. What remains is wrapped in the blue shopping bag. Her father can barely bring himself to look. That's her there, he says, torn into pieces.
So if you're listening, he opens a bag. It's a little plastic bag, twice wrapped, and he opens it, and then the cameras blur, and you realize that's her head, that's her hair, that's her face. Like, are we like, what planet are we on? Like, we cannot imagine what these folks are going through, and I cannot imagine the barbarism, the pieces of shit who would do this to anyone. But there you have it, Blakeley. I mean, that is what, like, if this doesn't radicalize you, if this doesn't wake you up, fucking what will?
Yeah, I honestly ask myself that sometimes, because this whole thing has totally changed me. It didn't just change my opinion on Israel-Palestine. It's changed me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel the same than before this happened. It's changed my politics too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking more at whether or not people think this is acceptable or whether they don't, rather than if they're Democrats or Republicans.
Oh, 100%.
To watch this day after day and to see this, it's hard to not know where to put the rage and the anger, and to feel so helpless to try to stop it, to feel like we have no voice in our so-called democracy, that this continues to happen, that these people are allowed to continue to carry out these atrocities in our name with our tax dollars and no consequences. And we all have to keep collectively pretending that the IOF is just the most incompetent army that's ever been, and they don't know how to do precision strikes and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And that it was just, it was an accident. It was an accident. I am so tired of their gaslighting. And it just, I feel like I want to do something and I don't know what to do. Yeah. Because it feels to me, this has been a reminder that we do not control our own country. We don't control our own government, because if we did, this would have stopped.
Yes.
And the other reminder that our entire facade of international law, kind of what you were talking about earlier, is a joke. And I'm glad we can dispense with that. That we've always pretended that we really care about international law in the UN. I'm glad they've revealed to us that we don't. If they don't. And the other thing that I think of when I see this kind of stuff is, understandably, those who are left, because I know they think they're going to eradicate Hamas, but they're not going to. Those who are left are going to understandably despise those who did this to them. And if anybody thinks that there is not going to be consequences to that, you're delusional.
Yeah. I mean, the blowback will happen. The blowback could happen on Americans.
Yeah.
But I also think that it is anyone internationally watching, and this happened during the Iraq War as well. We all took the streets, and whether it's polls, whether it's calls, whether it's taking the streets, everyone knew the world over that we were going to war over the opinions of voters and the American public. It was just clear this was what was going to happen. And the same thing on this. But on that oopsie, that's exactly what Israel said. Top military prosecutor said that the attack was grave. Netanyahu said it was a mistake, and now there's an investigation. This is exactly what they said. However, after every single massacre that we've seen in the last 8 months, after the Jabalia massacre, remember the massive crater on the refugee camp, the Al-Shifa hospital massacre, the multiple massacres, obviously the mass graves are like, I guess that's still under investigation. The flour massacre, when people were trying to get food and get fed, the World Central Kitchen that killed 7 international aid workers and 1 Palestinian. And then now this is again being called the tent massacre, which is no longer applicable because 3 days later, there's another tent of displaced families that are attacked. So, but maybe for a little bit of humor, here is what the spokesperson for the Israeli government, Avi Hyman, says what they're doing and how serious they take this.
We went after 2 Hamas commanders responsible for many attacks in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, but predominantly Judea and Samaria. They were drenched in Israeli blood, these 2 individuals. According to initial reports, a fire broke out after the attack. These terrorists were hiding underground, and it would appear that there were civilian casualties. We're looking into this. That it was definitely grave. Any loss of life, civilian life, is grave, and is awful.
All right, this dude doesn't give a shit about it. So this is what they said. They said they were going after Hamas, 2 Hamas leaders, which we know now that that's their justification. It doesn't matter. You can kill 300 civilians if you get an alleged 2 Hamas militants. But again, this is just a couple weeks after, and Blakeley, I'm sure you saw this.
Yes, I did.
This is just a couple, and I'll sort of scrub through this. But this is like a week after Avi Hyman was on Piers Morgan, and Piers, I guess, grew a fucking pair and finally pushed back a little bit on this Israeli spokesperson who clearly thought this was going to be a layup and was not. So he asks him, how many civilians have you killed? Because they're like, oh, we've killed 14,000 Hamas fighters. Like, where? Like, what are you even talking about? 14,000 is actually the number of children. That's a low estimate for the number of children who have been killed, and or the number of men over the age of 18. Like, however they're counting it is bullshit. But here, Piers is asking the same dude, how many civilians? Do you count how many civilians have been killed?
We don't have exact figures, as you know. It's the fog of war.
But you've got exact numbers for Hamas terrorists you've killed. Why wouldn't you know how many civilians you've killed?
Because obviously our focus is to go after the Hamas terrorists. And
hang on, I mean, that does imply that you're putting a bigger premium on killing Hamas terrorists in terms of numbers and accountability than you are on innocent civilians. That can't be right, surely. If you know exactly how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, you must know how many civilians you've killed. Otherwise, you're prioritizing the lives of terrorists over innocent people.
I mean, it's a simple point, right? Like, which again, Blakeley, what's crazy is the United States is, after this tent massacre, their line is the fucking same, which is, we implore Israel to do everything they can in their power to minimize civilian casualties. It's like, but they don't. They relish in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do not. They don't even keep track of them.
Yeah. But they have all the militants that they have track of. I loved that interview. I thought that interview was hilarious because Piers, but do you condemn Hamas Morgan, did not even realize that he was like grilling this guy. It was like accidental.
Right. Well, let's watch a little bit more, because there's a moment that you're like, wait a minute, did it freeze?
Yeah.
Piers, with respect, don't put words into my mouth, please. I didn't say exactly 14,000. I said around 14,000. Whereas Hamas will come out with precise numbers that statisticians will look at.
Give me a ballpark number for civilians.
Well, you can use the ballpark as far as the Hamas figures, which I reject as being false.
Wait, I love that he's like, well, I don't have a number, so just use the Hamas number, which is just the Gaza Health Ministry number. But he's like, but they're not real. But we all know you rely on them. The United States rely come up with another number. Just come up with a different number. Just lie into a different number. But they don't care enough about covering their asses to even lie about a fake number. Just say 11,000 instead of 36.
Well, if they're false, why would you give me those?
I gave you the numbers that I had.
No, you told me you know how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, but you don't seem to have any idea how many civilians you've killed. I'm just bemused. Why wouldn't you keep count of both?
I don't have that information to give you, Piers. If I did, I would.
You literally no idea how many civilians you've been killing.
I can tell you definitively that our aim is to go after Hamas.
No, but
We've
hang
done
on.
it successfully.
I'm sorry to push you on this. That's quite extraordinary. You're an official spokesman for the
Isn't it,
Israeli
though?
government, and you have no idea how many civilians you've killed. I thought you just told me that you were particularly careful about not killing civilians. But if you don't know how many you've killed, how can you say that with any certainty?
Because even if you were to go by a ratio of the Hamas figures, we would still be far ahead of any
That wasn't
Western
my
army.
question. You know,
We'd be far ahead of any Western army. Like,
How do you know you're far ahead if you don't know the number?
far ahead of what? Like, yeah, we do. We've killed far fewer babies than everyone's got their. And here's the thing, Blakeley. Yeah, he stops and he like literally won't answer. Like he's like, stonewalling him a little bit later. But if you push them, the answer is always, just like with any unaccountable person in power, it's always so.
Yeah.
And also, what about the American genocide against the natives here?
Yeah.
All right.
I love
What
that one, yeah.
don't Jews deserve their own to do genocide, or are you anti-Semitic? Like, this is literally the logic, and it's been told to me. It's been told to all of us. Like, oh, so what are you saying? And it's just like, it's whataboutism. And at the end of the day,
Yes.
so what?
Endless whataboutism. And I've had people say that to me all the time. Aside from getting called anti-Semitic every single second of every day, I get aren't you an American?
Yeah.
Was there a genocide? Is if that's supposed to be some kind of checkmate, like, oh, you know what? You're right. There was a genocide in America against Native people. So you know what? My bad. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
on. Do your
Ooh, yeah,
thing.
sorry. No, everyone gets one. See, that's how history works. Everyone gets a genocide.
Yeah. It's not fair. We're such hogs. We're always hogging everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How dare you? But
I also love how he goes, it was a fire broke out. A fire broke out. It just broke out. Everything just happens to happen to kill all these civilians.
Yep.
It wasn't that they dropped a 2,000-pound bomb on it. It was that a fire just broke out. And they got the two militants that they just said were underground. So if they were underground, why were you bombing a tent camp?
Yeah.
You're just aspires. It's ridiculous. But it's like you said, they never get held accountable for anything. They never do. So they don't need to care enough to come up with convincing lies.
Exactly. They're just kind of like, what do you want from me? I don't know. Speaking of headlines and how we frame this, New York Times headline is Gazans look through ashes after Israeli strike on Rafah. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so silly. I don't know why we're being flowery with this. Gazans burned alive.
Yeah.
And thank God they actually put Israeli strike on Rafah. That's good.
Yeah, but I guess you're right. That's progress. Because before they would just go by airstrike, like it kind of just happened. These are the same people that I'm sure you saw that the Atlantic came out with an article saying sometimes killing kids is legal.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, we are. I mean, it's like I can't believe it this late date. But anyway, Piers has evolved. Blakeley.
Yeah, I saw that Piers Morgan is now Hamas.
Tweeting, the scenes from Rafah overnight are horrific. I've defended Israel's right to defend itself after October 7th, but slaughtering so many innocent people as they cower in a refugee camp is indefensible. Stop this now, Netanyahu. To which this person, I am Blakeley, said, yeah, but you condemn Hamas, which is so perfect. Like, thank you, massive propagandists, for having a heart on this one instance. But also, do you understand, like, that you are so part of the bullshit propaganda machine, the bullshit skewing of this issue by your line of questioning of, do you condemn Hamas? Because I'm sure, no doubt he's faced a lot of like Zionists who are like freaking out at Piers. I thought you were an ally.
Actually, that's what's beautiful about it. That was what was beautiful about it, because Piers Morgan has spent the last 7 months going, yeah, but do you condemn Hamas over everything? So to see the Zionists retweeting him and going like, looks like he was co-opted by Hamas. I'm like, oh, the questioner has become Hamas.
Yes. And we have to bring our other guests in, but I quickly want to pivot to this. Give me 3 minutes, y'all, because we have to talk. Blakeley, on this show, as you said, Democrats and Republicans are very much in lockstep when it comes to Israel, but there are shades of gray in hell, or shades of flames or whatever. And we see that today in something like Nikki Haley, former presidential candidate who recently, and I didn't cover this yet, but recently said this about the actual presidential nominee, Donald Trump.
Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump.
There we are. We had it. I didn't think it would happen this soon. I knew it would happen, but there is the, not even a never Trumper, but just the rational Republican endorsing Donald Trump, saying she's going to vote for him. But she was in Israel, doing a lot of things. Hang on, let's save this. She was visiting with hostage family members. I guess those who aren't in the streets, shutting things down in Tel Aviv, demanding that the government do more to actually bring home their loved ones. She, there are photos of her touring the kibbutzes that were attacked by Hamas on October 7th, which, yes, is awful. But at the same time, we know those tours, and I've talked about it on the show, are run by an extremist organization that mishandled human remains, called the Zaka Group, and that they have been getting rich off of these tours, and the people who were attacked still cannot move home. This is fact. Their homes are now a museum for every psycho politician Zionist that wants to go to visit the site of the Hamas alleged rapes that didn't happen. But like, so right. So that she's there. And then the photo I showed, if you're listening, it is her writing, signing a missile, obviously a US made American missile. And when you zoom in, she writes, "Finish them!" ! America loves Israel always. Nikki Haley. So look, Biden may not be, Biden is definitely sending, these are Biden's missiles, but at least he's not writing his name on them saying finish them. I don't know, but this is off after Mike Pence did the same thing. But Blakeley, you're like, this is some psycho shit. This will end up in a family's, this will end up blowing the head off a baby.
Yeah. And they know that. They know that. They don't care, because like these psychopaths in the IOF who admitted that maybe they should have finished them off in 2014, because the little kids are going to grow up to be Hamas.
Right.
It's so psychotic. I can't stand these people. And they're going and touring it like it's like a concert or something, like taking photos and having photo ops at it's so sacred.
Can you imagine if we had toured, like, look, I'm not saying the US is much better, but God damn it. Yes, there's a 9/11 memorial, but if there were fucking tours with like blood on the wall or like body parts and shit down at ground zero for people to come to, what would we all think?
Right.
How would that look?
It's insane that they're turning this into a spectacle.
Yeah.
And you have to be some kind of sociopathic piece of garbage to go and write on a missile that you know is most likely not going to hit a militant unless he goes home with his family. And then you
right. In that case.
Yeah.
All bets are off.
Going to hit children. And you're proud of that. She's a psycho. It's like, that's the thing that's so maddening about the bar being on the floor for Democrats, is that the Democrats are monsters on this too. And then you turn around and you say, I can't stand the Democrats. And then you look over and Nikki Haley signing missiles. And it's like, oh, right.
It's just, and look, Biden is susceptible to pressure. I think when you said, what do we do? I know there is a mass mobilization being called for June 8th, which is in just a week, 2 weeks. To surround the White House. There are lots of actions in every single country, honestly. Like Paris was lit in protest of what happened on Sunday. But we have to keep the pressure on and put your people on speed dial. I don't call my rep nearly as much. I'll admittedly say that, but I need to stalk his ass, and I should. We should all be like Mossad on the ICC when it comes to, because that's what they're doing.
There Yeah, and there are actually apps that you can sign up for and attach them to your Instagram or your TikTok. So every time you open the app, it sends your rep an email.
Shut up. I love that. I love that. See, anyway, that's what TikTok was doing. That's what TikTok was doing. Like, call your reps so that they don't ban us. And I actually think that's a brilliant idea. I'm like, oh, you're using this app. I know that's like a Chinese government thing to be like, hey, don't ban us. But also I'm like, this is at least versus like mining us and our information and selling off all of our data, that like, they're also like, you know what? Call your rep. Just call it. I love that. I need to install that on my Instagram. But Blakeley, we have 2 guests, and actually incredibly honored to have both of the guests actually, but one of the guests, because she's usually a producer behind the scenes working on the Bituation Room, but she's an incredible journalist in her own right and has written for In These Times, The Nation, and so many other places. Where else, Paige? Please welcome Paige Oamek. Hey. And then we have somebody else, journalist based in the UK who worked with the BBC, The Nation, In These Times, New Republic. Welcome, Rohan Montgomery. Rohan, hi.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here, both of you.
Thank you. I'm honored and excited.
We're gonna switch it up. And Blakeley, please feel free to chime in. But you guys both have been writing. Well, you have this article specifically about Kentucky and the way that Kentucky is almost piloting the criminalization of homeless people to a level that's like, it's like a blanket law. Enough of these small little laws that cities and states pass here piecemeal. Why don't we have a whole buffet of ways to like make the unhoused population disappear and feel awful? So it's for, you have this for The Nation, and you talk about this law. I want to talk about that first, and then talk about what's going on the nationwide level in the Supreme Court. But what is the Safer Kentucky Act? It was signed into law. What's included? What is this buffet of going after the homeless?
Yeah, so the really like headline or attention grabbing part of the Safer Kentucky Act, HB 5, is that it basically decriminalizes the use of deadly force against individuals engaged in unlawful camping. So anyone who's unhoused, who just needs a place to stay. So if a property owner believes that like an unhoused person is trespassing and is attempting to commit a felony or dispossess him, they can shoot that person.
Wait. Okay, so that they can shoot them?
Yeah, and Kentucky already has like stand your ground laws, something that would maybe even protect this, even if it would have happened otherwise. Mm-hmm. But specifically written into this law is saying, hey, if you think somebody's gonna, do something bad on your property, just go right ahead.
And do something bad is just simply like camping, or, for example, this is just like a personal aside. My neighbors have like a hose that's like kind of faces the street, and there's a woman who, I don't know if she's unhoused, but whatever, she like sometimes will use that hose. She'll like use it to wash. Under this law, you could probably like that justifies someone trying to shoot at this woman, like doing anything on your property. Like maybe digging through your trash is another example. Next door freaks out about that. Someone's digging through my trash. They dig on your trash. It's okay to shoot them.
I think that the idea is that they would have to be doing something, you believe that they would be doing something illegal, such as like committing arson or trying to steal something of yours. But people who we talked to said that the vagueness of the law, because it's a little confusing, right? But that the vagueness of the law seems to be intentional, so that a jury would have to decide whether an individual was like crossing the line, and this is after they would be shot,
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is after the damage has been done. But Rohan, that's like the extreme, but there's also like what's crazy is just how much is in this bill. And can you explain what else is in the bill, and also where did it come from? Like, because this did not just emerge out of thin air.
Yeah, sure. So the ACLU They have a really good quote. They called it an extremely bloated collection of regressive policies and regurgitated ideas that have proven ineffective in the past. And that's basically what it's literally like a smorgasbord, a sort of tapas selection of every terrible tough on crime, quote unquote, idea that has emerged in the last sort of 50 years of like awful policy making.
Right.
There's like a 3-strike rule, which applies to various crimes and basically like will send you immediately to jail. There's the whole homelessness stuff. There's an expansion on already like Paige already mentioned that Kentucky stand your ground laws are really strong. They're expanding it even further. And a host of other things, which basically people we spoke to have said is kind of intentional because it throws all these advocacy groups into disarray because there's so much bad stuff. It's like, okay, well, do we tackle the homelessness stuff? But then they still have all these like crazy other tough on crime laws. Do we tackle the other crime laws and let the homelessness stuff get through? But then obviously that's bad because you've got all this crazy like shooting to kill homeless people who just are like camping on your property.
Right.
So it's almost like they're trying to jam through so much in one bill. It overwhelms the opposition and makes people just like lose any hope of stopping bad things from happening.
Yeah, it kind of compounds all of the little things like you can't, block a sidewalk or the 3 strikes law is really interesting because does that apply to like if you are found to be camping or whatnot? Like, because is that one of the strikes that could wind you in jail?
Yeah. So the first is a fine. It's like $250, I think, and then subsequent citations for unlawful camping is a Class B misdemeanor, and that's another $250 fine, but also up to 90 days in jail. And as people say time and time again, what's going to help a homeless person get off the streets? Put them in jail, take away all their possessions, and give them a $250 fine. That will help them afford housing.
Oh yeah, the job comes right after that. Like once you've gotten through the hurdles, there's like a prize, which is a home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Famously, people leaving prison and jail actually famously get given jobs and houses, and it's so much easier.
It's really easy. Yeah. No, obviously,
the resume booster.
I mean, the Netflix show Maid taught me that. I was like, damn, that is fucked up that she can't get a job or get a lease on any place. So anyway, but
yeah. And Francesca, you asked, where did this come from, right?
Yeah.
And in some way, as we were saying, it's a regurgitated, tough on crime stuff that we see over and over again. But it didn't spring up from nowhere. It sprang up from some place called the Cicero Institute, who has been shepherding anti-homeless laws for the past couple years in nearly every U.S. state. So they're conservative.
They're like they're like the ALEC of going after the homeless.
Exactly. They've made that their specialty.
And the poor as well, not just the homeless.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
So they're a conservative think tank founded by a Palantir alum, focused on fixing broken systems in the public sector.
Nice euphemism.
So they're, they have model legislation that's been passed in Missouri, Tennessee, Texas, Utah. And yeah, as I said, nearly every state, they're on their way.
And the other thing, Rohan, that from your guys' piece that I thought was really stark was potentially giving more power to landlords. So that obviously the housing crisis that results in homelessness is not fixed. It's still a crisis. But how could there be more power given to landlords? Either of you can answer, but I thought that was really chilling.
I think what we ended up, the way we ended up conceiving this is it's part of this wider movement where you'll hear people like in New York talking about like squatters' rights, quote unquote. And it's this big thing where like people are afraid that homeless people are going to steal your property or tenants are going to refuse to leave and like smash up your apartment. So, we need to give landlords the power to basically protect their property against these individuals. Because remember, a large majority of people blame people for being homeless, right? We're going to talk about the Supreme Court later. That's the whole thing. So, we've got to protect landlords from these awful criminals who are going to like destroy their property.
Who fucking deserve for their property to be destroyed. I'm sorry. I've had terrible landlords.
Yeah. And so in Kentucky, any amount of what the landlord believes or what the property owner believes to be intentional damage caused by when the tenant moves out could result in a criminal mischief charge. So
you didn't caulk up the holes that you put in the wall. I'm not giving you back your deposit, and two, I'm charging you with this. Like that's just it's so rich. It's so fucked because I've never seen legislation that also went after tenants. But because we all know, and as you guys write, as others have written about, and the advocates you've talked to, that so many folks are just one missed paycheck away, or a unexpected medical expense, or a death from a family member away from being homeless. What were those advocates saying? And also, maybe related to this, what were they saying about like Governor Andy Bashir, who's a fucking Democrat? Like, where are the Democrats on this? Speaking of, Democrat Republic consensus, I feel like it also applies to this issue.
Yeah, so what was tough about specifically this Safer Kentucky Act that we looked at is that Governor Andy Bashir, basically, because of the conservative supermajority, has absolutely no power to stop this act. So the act actually was approved by the House and Senate in Kentucky, and Bashir did eventually go on to veto it, but it doesn't matter because it'll just go into effect. But that was even a struggle that advocates were talking about, is trying to make sure that Democratic governor vetoed it, even symbolically, to show like this isn't right. As we know, and as we've seen in San Francisco and Portland, there's very little daylight between Democratic mayors or governors, our Democratic politicians and Republicans on the issue of homelessness. As we'll talk about the Supreme Court, Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor London Breed actually wanted the Supreme Court to take up anti-homelessness cases and beg them to do so.
Fuck them. Fuck Breed. Fuck Newsom. I'm so annoyed. I mean, like, ooh, I hate them. Because I used to live in SF, so that feels very, very close to home. And let me ask you, let's talk about the Supreme Court, right? So the Supreme Court has this case before them, which is I just I just read the whole article, but my brain's going blank. But it's Paige, explain what versus Johnson. It's Green. What? Tell me.
I can let Rowan hop in as well, but it's Grants Pass versus Johnson. So the Supreme Court actually chose not to take up. It's interesting. In 2019, they could have made a ruling about this, and they, in a similar case called Martin v. Boise, and they chose not to. Mm-hmm. But just a couple weeks ago, they had their oral arguments about Grants Pass versus Johnson, which is basically a case that would, we'd have this, very minimal protections for homeless people that are held in the like liberal Ninth Circuit, which is like Oregon, California, etc. We see what California and Oregon are still able to do, even with these minimal protections. But the protections basically say you can't throw someone in jail or, hand them an outrageous fine just for sleeping outside without the like offer for shelter, without somewhere for them to go. And basically the Supreme Court is ruling whether or not that's fair.
Right. And Grants Pass, excuse me, I was like getting up on this. So this is a place outside of Oregon, or in Oregon, that is a place that a lot of unhoused people camp. And Johnson were residents of this encampment, and Grants Pass like residents and the city are trying to basically evict them, and there's nowhere to go. There's no shelters for them. And so, but the Ninth Circuit Court has ruled that you can't, like, all of the draconian things that Grants Pass wants to implement to criminalize that population, to sweep them to this and that, that's sort of like there's an injunction to hold those laws from going forward. Do I kind of have that right, even though I got the name of the case wrong? Rowan?
Yeah. So Grants Pass is a town in like the real conservative part of Oregon. There's 40,000 people there and about 600 homeless folks. And you'll see people write that Grants Pass doesn't have an emergency shelter. That's what the Ninth Circuit decided, because the one shelter that it does have is fucking insane. If you want to stay in the shelter, you can't have sex, you can't do any drugs, including nicotine or alcohol. You have to go to two church services every day, and you have to perform unpaid work for the shelter.
What? Wait, I missed that part. I heard the rest. That's fucking insane.
Mm-hmm. So the Ninth Circuit was like, okay, that actually doesn't count as shelter. That's not like adequate shelter. So you don't have any shelter. And Grants Pass was like, what they wanted to do is they passed all these laws, which basically said they defined camping as like sleeping outside with a blanket, or if you take your jacket and like scrunch it up and use it as a pillow, if you're like lying down on the beach, you're like going against the law. That's illegal camping. And then they basically said that you couldn't do that anywhere. No public land, no under bridges, no private land, obviously. So basically it's impossible to be homeless in Grants Pass, and there's nowhere to go. So then you have these people, invisible people, went and interviewed a bunch of folks there a few months ago. There are people who, one woman said in the 18 months since they passed these ordinances, she's received $300 tickets. It's technically $295 if you want to be like real. But yeah, so what's that, like $9,000 in tickets, mental maths, hoping that's right, just for like existing in her tent on the street, or I think she's in a park. But
and the original plaintiff in Johnson died with like thousands of dollars of tickets unpaid.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, and what I mean, to say nothing of the hostility from residents, as I've been reading, residents like going over and like throwing out people's things and harassing them, but then the cops like pouring ice water on ice buckets on top of people's belongings and things like that, just to like, trying to make it, according to Grants Pass, they like, what they say, the word uncomfortable. They want to make being homeless uncomfortable. Like, bitch, sleep outside one night and you'll see how uncomfortable it is. It's like, by definition, being homeless is uncomfortable. You don't have to make it more so for these folks. But they are arguing for their, basically, that their Eighth Amendment rights are being violated by all of these new laws and the criminalization, because it's cruel and unusual punishment. And that homelessness effectively isn't a choice, that these are things they cannot control. And so criminalizing them is obviously violating the Eighth Amendment. But Paige, what's before the Supreme Court, should they choose to take it up, is effectively whether or not being homeless is a choice, whether or not there's a violation there, as so many right-wingers believe, and even just, uppity property owners believe that it is a choice. But can you explain? You started to, and maybe I cut you off.
Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, so basically, as often the Supreme Court is doing in choosing to take up a case, there's like more under the surface, right? So as Francesca talked about, there's the idea of status versus conduct. So conduct is like something that you do, status is something that you are. So if the Supreme Court rules, like overturns this case and rules in favor of the city, right? That means that mere like status can be criminalized. So not in effect, like not the act of being homeless, but like the status of being homeless, which would also open the door to all sorts of like thought crimes, allow states to effectively banish entire types of people based on status, and we know how dangerous that could be.
Sure. But I mean, is there a world in which even if they like don't take, or they sort of uphold Grants Pass and everything they want to do, that it doesn't really matter if you criminalize the state of being homeless, or because the activity of being homeless requires things like camping outdoors, or utilizing public water to wash, or like all of the activity that homeless folks participate in because of they are, like, that's already being criminalized. So it's kind of like, what's the, does it, or do you feel like it would be a massive departure if they were to throw it out completely and allow Grants Pass and all their legislation to go forward and the injunction to fall away?
Paige, you can weigh in on this, but like, the lived reality of homeless folks might not change significantly, especially in places without other protections. But the sort of fundamental question of does the Constitution protect homeless people? Saying no to that, I think, is a massive ideological shift, which, as Paige suggested, can open the door to even more sort of horrific policies being put into place, which, just to like reiterate, do not work in reducing homelessness. They cost more money and they achieve worse results. So it's
all of this is just a massive handout. We're going to talk about private equity firms. Like, all this is just a massive handout to like the prison industry that is like very much there's money to be made.
One of the things that drives me crazy about this is that there are people that will see this and they won't care because they won't think it affects them. They won't think that it affects them. I got news for anyone who says that. You don't choose to be homeless, and oftentimes you don't know that you are about to be. Like, people don't realize how quick it happens. I've been unhoused multiple times in my life, in my childhood, in my adulthood. And one of them was precipitated by relapse. So you can have a job, you can think everything's fine, you don't have a savings, and one thing like a relapse or your spouse relapsing or something like that can spiral into homelessness where you have nowhere to go and you are looking around trying to get yourself in a shelter, as I was. So people need to understand that this is going to affect you or could affect you, whether you think it's going to or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up. I mean, I think one of the people that I saw interviewed who lives at Grants Pass, her husband died. And so, you know, what was she to do? And she thought she was going to be able to make rent and couldn't. And then, all of a sudden had to be outside. But Paige, is there anything, I mean, I think that's an incredible point, Rohan, that you made in terms of like, does the Constitution apply to people who don't have homes or what the hell? Or like, you know, because there's part of me that's like, if we don't do anything about the housing crisis, it's not just gonna be the most vulnerable folks who are unhoused. It's just gonna be young people. Like, you know what I mean? Just like the amount of young people that will be unprotected because of this housing crisis and how expensive rent is. I mean, I don't know. It's getting a lot worse.
Yeah, I think that people misunderstand like what the face of homelessness looks like oftentimes. Like, it looks a lot more like the people in this room than like and like young people and queer people than like some imagined scary violent criminal, right? It's like it looks, and I think that like there's something about American, you know, mindset that like people really believe that they will be a billionaire before they believe that they'll be homeless. When in reality, most people are like one paycheck away from that happening. You know, there's some stat about Americans only having like, you know, $2,000 in savings or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And a lot of this ties back to, I think, you know, look, we're at the like 4th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. It ties back to the police and the role of the cops. And when you read these stories about cops, like half their job is just bullying the unhoused. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? It's not only that our taxpayer dollars or communities are investing in prisons, you know, which, as you mentioned, Rohan, the stats are just like so much more expensive to lock people up than it is to make housing affordable. And so, but like going back to like, what the fuck are the cops for? And, you know, it really is about, you know, protecting money and property owners. What's next, guys? Like, what happens? Like, does Kentucky's law, you know, Safer Kentucky and the Cicero Institute, does that just like fan out? Are there other states that have passed this similarly, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there are a handful of states that have passed Cicero's model legislation. I don't necessarily think this is a Cicero project, but I know that Florida will enact basically an anti-homelessness law in October. That'll go into effect in October. Safer Kentucky's goes into effect in July. And then the Supreme Court will rule on Grants Pass v. Johnson in like late June, early July, when they release decisions. And so basically, you know, regardless of what the court determines, which we know what they'll say, right? They'll rule on at least ideological lines, and, you know, would love to criminalize homeless people. Just taking the case opens up just like a vacuum of cruelty, and of basically giving other states the go-ahead to start passing stuff like the Safer Kentucky Act, and to criminalize sleeping on the street.
Right. Absolutely. Because like you mentioned, they are lifting up these cases that have already been decided. You know, they're trying to overrule these injunctions that have already been placed, because they're on an ideological trajectory here. Rowan, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing which might be a little insight into what our world could look like post the Supreme Court ruling, which is there were a bunch of Californian cities and state officials who petitioned the Supreme Court to rule in favor of Grants Pass. Democrat, Republican, crossed ideological lines. And there was one group which made Paige and I laugh, which was a group of 13 California cities. And their petition was that actually the Ninth Circuit's ruling, which said, as a reminder, you can't actually punish homeless people for being on the street if they have nowhere else to go. They argued that that ruling was actually cruel and unusual punishment against housed people because it forced them to encounter homeless people on the street. So who knows? Maybe, you know what? Someone's got to stick up for the rights of housed people. And it looks like we're going to be entering that era. Finally.
But that's what it is. I mean, this is what people who are not, have never experienced what Blakeley, you've experienced. That's what they think that being unhoused is. It's an offense to me to have to see it, to have to interact with it, you know, and which is just so fucking wild. Barb on over here in the super chat says indentured servitude is likely to make a comeback as homelessness becomes illegal. Like that seems
for real.
But for real, that seems like a ridiculous thing to say, but not really if you're like, you can be on this property if you work the garden, you know, but I'll only pay you 2 pennies. Like, wait, this is fucking where we're at.
It's so crazy. And it's like, I just want to say too what Paige said, that really just, I was like, yes, that's correct. People think that the face of being unhoused looks a certain way and is a certain way. They're the same people that think somebody can't be poor because they have a cell phone. Like, it's just delusional. Like, yes, you can. And there are many people who you would not think, because they won't tell you, that are unhoused, that are working full-time jobs and living in their car.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, oh my God. They are not unemployed. Again, personal anecdote, but it's whatever. Like, you know, watching a man, I remember in SF, living under this bridge, and I just watched him, like, as I was in traffic, like, sweep his tent. He was just like sweeping it because it was dirty, obviously. And there he had a cat, and I love a cat story. And he just has this cat, like, and the cat's like patiently waiting outside the tent on a leash as he's like cleaning his tent. He clearly, like, and it's just like that humanity, that like, I have a pet. I literally live here. I probably work not so far away, but San Francisco rent is too fucking inaccessible to actually, you know, live near where I work. These are folks who have jobs. They have jobs. They're just not jobs that compensate them well enough.
Yeah, and we know that London Breed sent texts to the police to like sweep homeless people from like areas where she wanted to have lunch. You know,
bitch,
I love
this
that
bitch
one.
goes to a park, is like, ew, gross. Text the fucking SFPD.
And
to
lastly,
sweep them. Oh my God, the shame.
And just on that point of like, yeah, like what Project 2025 vibes, you know, what could this look like? You know, the Cicero Institute has said that their solution to mass incarceration is a competitive market-based reward systems for private prisons. They've said that part out loud.
What? A competitive rewards-based system for private prisons?
Which would encourage innovation in techniques to reduce recidivism. And so private prisons, Joe Lonsdale of the Cicero Institute said, could be rewarded with money and new inmates to replace the old inmates who will not return to prison. So yeah, they're just trying to...
Unless we need a little bit of a pay bump, unless our shareholders are pissed, and in which case we'll arrest them for literally anything and put them back. That's fucking sick. Yeah, well, you know, fuck the tech bros. Fuck these motherfuckers. They cannot like, oh, we're gonna innovate our way / make a bunch of money off of homelessness.
Yeah,
Rohan
and if you like that, read Rowan and I's piece about urban alchemy of San Francisco. You know, the San Francisco-based nonprofit looking to innovate our way out of homelessness.
Well, we will link to that because I think that's an incredible expose too. Do you want to just mention it? Like, what's going on? Like, are they getting money from? Are they being funded to do that?
Yeah, I mean, long story short, a private, nonprofit has stepped in to take the blame for cities failing on homelessness, and they'll, cities basically get to privatize their homelessness services through employing these formerly incarcerated people who are paid minimum wage to basically police other homeless people. And they wear a big all-seeing eye vest and camo. And if you've ever been out, in San Francisco in the past 3 years, you see them on every corner in downtown. They're, in our interview, the CEO compared herself to Jesus. Yeah, we love her.
You guys are you're guys so prolific that I apologize that I'm not even asking you about that, but I did kind of want to share this. I didn't believe you about the seeing eye, but this is their logo. That's fucking chilling. We aim to raise the vibrations in urban spaces. What the fuck? Are they going around with crystals and save the lives of those who exist on their streets?
Are they trying to troll us? Like, it's like they're doing it on purpose.
That is wild. Okay, so right, there's always going to be like someone trying to make a buck and in the most heinous way, sort of cruel way possible, employing formerly incarcerated people to do it. Just give people homes and healthcare. Fuck me. Thank you so much, Rohan Montgomery, and thank you so much, Paige Oamek. That name sounds familiar. I just feel like somewhere. You crush it. I love your writing. I love you guys. Rowan, I just met you, but I love you too.
Peace out.
Be very well. And I'm gonna but I'm gonna keep you on, Blakeley, just for a little bit. Just for a little bit longer, because we have a new game to play, which is what hasn't been taken over by private equity firms. Now, this is a very difficult game because there's very few things that still are not owned and operated by private equity. But recently, it was announced that Red Lobster was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And I think a lot of people were sad. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going away. Mm-hmm. It might not go away the way of Sizzler, which I think suffered from the pandemic as well. Buffets are not very cool. But people are pissed. People are upset. Cheddar Bay biscuits, all you can eat, something. I don't know. So I wanted to look into it because I was like, private equity firms, we've heard of them. What are they? What do they actually do? And from what I've surmised, and just to explain it, it's basically what the IMF does to global South countries, which is I'm going to give you a bunch of money, but only if you restructure your entire economy. In this case, if you restructure your business, if you restructure your hospital, if you restructure your nursing home, if you restructure your school, in order to maximize profit for me and my shareholders and my firm. But I will give you this loan. But again, it comes with a fuck ton of stuff. And generally, like with the IMF and the World Bank, what they do to the global South is they leads to like a total deterioration of their economy and eventually economic collapse, as in the case of Argentina and many other nations, Greece. That's what private equity does to companies. Mm-hmm. Is like, I'm going to like invade you like a fucking cancer and then destroy you. But like, I'm going to get rich in the meantime. And it doesn't even matter if you declare bankruptcy, because I don't care, because I will have even made money. Basically, I could even short your stock. I mean, they don't actually do this, but they kind of do that. Like, I will make money no matter what. So we all remember Toys R Us. Toys R Us was bought by private equity and then fucked. And now you literally can't get toys other than Amazon and Target, maybe a local toy shop if you're lucky. I'm pissed. I was pissed about that.
I was too. It hurt. I love
It
Toys R Us
hurt.
as a kid.
I love Toys R Us. Oh my God. And apparently they're maybe trying to make a comeback. We will see. But okay. What things are not fully owned by private equity? This is private equity. Know the answer, so I'm asking you. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. You'll catch on quick though.
Is it multiple choice?
It's multiple choice.
Okay,
No, just say one that's not private equity owned.
Got it.
Okay. And everyone can play along. So first is chain restaurants. Olive Garden, Buffalo Wild Wings, or Auntie Anne's. That's the pretzels. Which is not owned by a
And I know it. Love Auntie Anne's. I'm gonna guess that it is Buffalo Wild Wings.
That answer is wrong. The correct answer is all of them are owned by private equity firms. In fact, the equity firm that owns Olive Garden was like, you need to get rid of free breadsticks because we're losing way too much money. That's literally their selling point.
Right. Why else would you go to Olive Garden?
Okay, so a little bit of a trick question, but I promise the rest of them are totally legit. Amusement parks, which is not owned by a private equity firm. SeaWorld, Chuck E. Cheese, or Legoland.
Chuck E. Cheese.
That is incorrect. Chuck E. Cheese, as well as SeaWorld and Legoland, are all owned by private equity firms.
Great question.
Here we go. I promise you I will not trick you. This one's actually hard. This one's actually crazy. Okay. What entertainment outlet is not owned by private equity? Cirque du Soleil, Second City, Improv Hub of Chicago and other cities, and Upright Citizens Brigade. UCB, Second City, or Cirque du Soleil, one of them is not owned by private equity.
Okay, well, you tricked me the first 2 times, so I'm going to say all of them.
God damn it, you're right. Fuck yeah, they are all owned by private equity. Cirque du Soleil is owned. UCB, for those of you sorry assholes that pay money to get improv classes at UCB, that is going to a private equity firm. Like, look, that's fine. Sometimes that's what you got to do. But holy shit, I did not know that. They're all owned by private equity firms.
I guess it makes sense that it was only a matter of time before it happened here, like you were explaining about how IMF, destroyed the global south. It really was only a matter of time before they were like, we've run out of countries to destroy. We needed to just destroy our own.
Exactly. They're like, this is not fun anymore. Let's go closer to home. Camperman 5000. I'm going to betray you even more and there's 2 more categories. I literally wanted to make this a game. I wanted to make this a game and be like, no, one of these things is good. One of these things is not owned by private equity. I'm sure I can find a like recognizable brand name that is not owned by private equity. Does not exist. Impossible. In fact, Paige and I were doing it. I think maybe Dr. Bronner's, the soap company, which I was like, there's no way in shit. I think they are not owned by private equity. But who knows where they're distributed and all the those grocery chains and like, yeah, those might be private equity owned. Nursing homes, prisons. I was like, let me look at Little League Baseball. I bet Little League is not. Minor League Baseball is owned by private equity. Then I was like, what about coffee? Okay, what about coffee? What about like some like shishi coffee brands? Blue Bottle, Stumptown. What about Phil's? Good old Phil's. All of them not fully owned, but have a massive stake of private equity in them. Like, I was on a Alaska Airlines flight and they had Stumptown coffee, which I was like, hell yeah, this is great. But also, what the fuck? What does that mean? Like, this is scary to me. Not that I'm really that loyal to Stumptown, but I'm like, it's everywhere. It's everything. And we are told that capitalism somehow still exists. This is not capitalism. This is like systematizing vulture capitalism. This is like you're saying, preying on your own, right? this is preying on the economy because it doesn't matter if these brands and these things go out if they go under, and it's contributing to the consolidation of conglomerates like Amazon or, the little guys like Target, which I think is a little guy at this point, poor Lowe's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, exactly. That's why it's so hard when you are looking through places that you want to boycott, because if for whatever reason you're boycotting them, whether it's Gaza or anything else, it gets really overwhelming because you realize that everything has something super problematic about it.
Well, yeah.
Like, where do I get stuff?
Exactly. Well, I mean, and there is the like no ethical consumption under capitalism line that I have some issue with, because I do think personal choice is important. I do think, trying to reduce your carbon footprint is important, but at the same time, yeah, like it is really difficult to buy ethically, to avoid weapons manufacturers. I mean, I didn't even go into like, I was going to bitch about this recently, but here in LA and a lot of people who are in the industry, like, how like post-strike, the industry of writing and television and acting and all that, it's just completely atrophying. There's very little work. And a lot of it is thanks to private equity firms not getting enough of return. And it's like, who cares about your fucking story or, art or doing something interesting? No. We want to make money. We're here to make money. And of course we will replace you with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I know you're a songwriter, and there's right now, if there's one silver lining about the Biden administration is like their antitrust is pretty good. They're going after Ticketmaster and Live Nation for their fuckery. But because I mean, live entertainment, I mean, Blakeley, like I'm a stand-up comic, like we don't make a lot of money and you want to go after our money, It's like musicians aren't like rich, does anyone think that like there's a lot of money to be had? This is like the way that like, again, like AI influencers are replacing like content creators like us. We're just kind of barely making it.
Yeah. And it's funny because they've made it very clear that they don't want us to be anything artistic. They don't.
Right.
There is no, they don't want room for art. They want for people to be machines and to be just cogs in this machine. And every single day they make it more clear that they want to squeeze the life out of any art form possible because they don't view it as something that they can easily quantify in numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
And if you can't quantify it on numbers on a spreadsheet, they don't want it to exist. And yet, as you said, we're still calling this like free market capitalism. Like, can we please dispense with that facade?
Yeah.
I know it's facade. People always get on me when I say that, but I like saying facade.
I think facade is, it's even better. Like facade's too like soft,
Yeah. Like, can we just stop with the facade? We know that this is crony corporatism, oligarchy. It's a lot of things. It's not free market capitalism.
No, absolutely not. And what's so fucked is like, it's also leading to like people, it's funneling people into fascism.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing works anymore. There's no like, my nursing home, like that I put my grandma in or my mom in, like led to her death, or like this hospital is like, yeah, there's like whatever, they like put my life in danger. The education system, but even simple things like, yeah, I can't find any customer support, or everything's automated now. Like, so I'm mad at Biden, like it's so ripe for fascism because people just want like any solution when there's been no stop to like hand over fist money, as if fucking someone like Trump would only green light. I mean, as I was listening to Rohan and Paige, I was like, God, this is would be a dream come true for right wingers if and when Trump gets a second term, right? They'd be like, that he wants to deport Palestine protesters. Of course, he'd want to also deport the unhoused. So it's just like, we make it worse, and then we sort of and Democrats allow, and liberals allow, like the stage to be set for true demagoguery, for true like takeover. Anyway, yeah.
No one notices until it's too late. That's
Yeah.
what's scary. I feel like regular people, regular quote unquote average Americans who don't really pay attention, they sense that something is wrong, or they may have experienced something personally in their own life that happened as a result of this system that is wrong. But it's scary to think about how we're accelerating. And once the collapse actually comes, it will happen very fast. And I feel like not enough people are putting together what's happening
right
before it's too late. And that's
interesting enough. You're like, oh, okay, well, look, private equity firms is very boring of a topic. I'm sorry, it's not a ring of underground, like an underground ring of Democratic pedophiles. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if we want to call private equity, you can call them, pedophile equity. Like, we could call them that, whatever it takes for you to pay attention, because people are like, they don't love the conspiracies that are right in front of their fucking faces.
Yes.
It's too easy, They're like, nah, it's got to involve lizards. If you could work lizards in there somehow, I'll consider it a problem.
Where's the groomer?
Exactly. Where's the groomer? They are grooming. They're definitely grooming. They're grooming the orcas at SeaWorld.
Yes.
Which honestly, like, fuck SeaWorld. They should probably go under anyway.
True,
right? Free that orca so it can go sink a yacht. Blakeley, you're wonderful. I appreciate your passion. I love when I have someone on who's just like, I'm jumping in, let's go, not holding back. And you don't hold back, and I appreciate you. So where can people follow you and like support what you're doing?
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed being on. I've obviously seen you around for a long time because I've been watching TYT for like 10 years. So I've seen you around. So
I'm not responsible for anything you didn't like, but I am responsible for things you did.
Yeah. So I am excited and really appreciate you having me on. If people want to support me, I'm trying to start to grow my YouTube. So it's new. Yeah. I didn't start it that long ago, but it's my same handle. I am Blakeley. And I started to do that because I'm being censored a lot on TikTok and Instagram. But they can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram or Spotify, all the same names. I'm Blakeley, or just Blakeley. And yeah, that's it. Do you mind if I give a shout out for some tents for Gaza?
Please.
Okay, cool. So if people would like to help with some people trying to get more tents in Gaza, there is this initiative. It's a grassroots volunteer-led initiative called Operation Olive Branch. They have spreadsheets online. You can just Google Operation Olive Branch spreadsheet. And if you go within there, there is a tab that says the Samir Project. And they are working on an initiative called the Samir Abu Salim Tent Initiative, where if you donate to them or you help them organize, they're trying to get new tents for the people that lost theirs in Gaza.
That's great. I think it's like, I'm trying to go there and it's crashing because I think so many people are trying to support it. But look, like, I think it's really important to put money, give money directly to Gazans, but also I really think it's important to give money to, and I know we're all being hit up, but to like squad members who actually want a ceasefire, because we deserve better representatives and we can't fight. I'm worried about Jamal Bowman. I'm worried about like the few people we have being, attacked by AIPAC. We're going to talk about this later, but like Pramila Jayapal's sister was, her campaign for in Oregon was tanked by AIPAC, millions and millions of dark money dollars pouring in.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's circumvent the fucking American pier, which we didn't talk about it, but it's floating away, y'all. It's not working. The shit's floating away. Operation Olive Branch. Everybody check it out and donate whatever you can. And thank you so much, Blakeley. Everybody follow I Am Blakeley. And thank y'all for being here. Let's read some comments and then F off after the fart song. Christo Stefan says, woohoo, I'll up my membership to get you guys here. Thank you. SV Harkin on Twitch. Remember Epstein worked for Mossad and friends with Trump and collected compromising stuff on all those US politicians and scientists? I forgot Epstein's Mossad connections, but it's like anyone shady is connected to Mossad. And like Mossad is, I don't feel like they're stealing like the FBI's like, shady valor here. Robert, thank you for your super chat. At the end of World War II, there was a long list of Nazis who thought they were going to get high-ranking jobs in a new government and not the gallows. I mean, yes, to a lesser extent, I think, while it might not be the gallows, Israel's turning into a pariah state, and we have to make sure that the people who supported these kinds of atrocities are pariahs. You can every day choose not to be a pariah. You can every day choose to stand on the right side of history. You can every day stop going after people who are speaking out, stop costing them work and jobs. I know people who've lost, again, in Hollywood, their jobs, their representation, likely because of Palestine. Thankfully, that's why I choose to not be successful, because I don't want to lose. Do you know what I'm saying? So patreon.com/situationroom, y'all. Rachel Atwood, are there any Republicans speaking up about human rights atrocities in Israel, or is it just the isolationists who don't want to spend any public money? Yeah, it's isolationists and then actual anti-Semites, right? It's like Candace Owens. I mean, not elected officials, but, Candace Owens and Andrew Tate, and you're like, I don't trust anything you say. Count Juan says, in 5 years, Gaza will be gentrified, McMansions brought to you by Trump and Kushner estates. Yes. Joe Turner, I hate Piers, but he just dropped the mic on that dude. He did. BCAD K says, I love Blakeley, the only TikTok channel I watch regularly. Man with long last name. They for sure don't want to bring home the hostages. No, they don't. Why do we even have to pretend? Riley Cool saying, I call and email every single day. Their reps. Thank you so much. Christo Stefan, thank you for being a member. And also 120 people applied for my apartment. Unhoused people have no chance. I think, I don't know what I'm reading there, but yeah, that's crazy. What you have to do to get an apartment, the background checks, the employers, what the fuck are you as if it were an actual massive housing loan or something like this. No, it's just to pay too much money for a too small place to live. William McGregor, thank you for your super chat. As a former homeless person due to a work-related injury, I could use some happy news. Can you please cover orcas sinking yachts this week? Let's do some happy news tomorrow for the bonus. I promise you. Yeah. And Germ says, I was in a shelter with a bunch of Iraq and Afghanistan vets because they got fucked over by the government. We just had Memorial Day, which I know honors the fallen, those who've been killed in combat, but closely related are their brethren who survived. And those are vets. And look no further than how Donald Trump wanted to privatize the VA, how we treat veterans in this country. It's so fucking despicable. And yet they can say that in the same breath, support the troops, criminalize and lock up homeless people. That's not dissonant for them. David DeNuno, homelessness is a choice made by capitalists. Indeed. Trent says, living in an 89 Jeep all through college, Kmart parking lot with a Denny's. Right. And that's the other thing is I believe Rowan didn't talk about this or Paige didn't talk about this, but in the article that they wrote, sleeping in your car is a crime. It's what the fuck? This is my fucking car. And we didn't cover this, but I think Paige, who's been on this beat for a while, we've talked about how AI is being trained to spot whether people are sleeping in their cars, to spot camper vans that are parked in the same place where maybe people live, which is just bravo. I'm so glad all of our freshwater resources are going to cool down computer processing systems that can be official narcs on folks who can't afford an apartment. I'm bless this world. We are very overdue for a revolution, y'all. Sivanari on Twitch, so just war tourism, genocide tourism, no biggie. Yeah, speaking about what's going on in those kibbutzes in Israel, just so wild. Daki Zero says, art is what you make because you love the world and want to give it a present. Indeed. What a good show, guys, even though I felt a little kerfuffled sometimes, but it was so good. And you know what? To thank everybody for all your support, let's just fart it out, man. We're going with the fart song. Here we go. I've decided to start new YouTube members in the Fart Song. So thank you, Marcus Aurelius, for becoming a member. And thank you, Morbius Dragon, for gifting a membership. You're the best. And thank you to our new patrons at $10 or more. Todd Gentry, thank you. You're awesome. Thank you to the big tippers. Mohammed, how ever can I thank you? What a generous guy. That fart was for you. Chris, thank you so much for your tip. And Jonathan Cook, you guys, if you want to tip the show, TBR-Live on Cash App, TBR Live on, TBR-Live on Venmo, TBR Live on Cash App. Thank you so much. Let's go over to Twitch. Thanks so much, Fascist Killa, for resubscribing. Thank you so much, Fight for the Cause, also for resubscribing. Twitch a little quiet today, maybe. A little quiet. Just a little quiet. It's all good. And of course, thank you to Maximilian Inhofe, to Andy Vasoyan, to Paige Oamek, who's not only a wonderful producer of this show, but an incredible journalist and reporter whose work I admire. And so please read her work. We'll link to it in the description. We'll see you tomorrow for the bonus episode, and Friday. Again, remember, we stream Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Wednesday on Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Follow the show on Twitter at BitchwationPod. TikTok and Instagram at Bitchwation Room. And remember to fight the power, fuck the patriarchy, free Palestine, and don't just bitch about it, be about it. Bye.